In the aftermath of a sexual assault, one young Marine struggled to cope with what happened and with her underlying health conditions. It seemed for her that each place she turned, each person she turned to, she was met with either unwillingness or inability to help. She moved but continued to spiral until someone finally ended up in custody. Not her reported assailant, but her. This is Conduct Unbecoming. I'm Erin, and I'm your host. This case does involve discussion of sexual assault, but I think the more prescient warning that I need to give you all is that it centers on suicidal ideation and mental health crises. I think that's what makes this case so important to talk about, especially because so many young people join the armed forces before they're out of the sort of danger zone of mental disorder. And because the experiences people have in the services can expose them to really damaging trauma on top of whatever they walked in with. So I ask that you take care if you choose to listen to this episode. I am including a number of resources in the show notes if you or someone you know is experiencing mental distress and needs a lifeline. Tae Ou started her life as a fighter. She was born in a refugee camp in Bangkok, the child of Burmese freedom fighters. Her parents fought to advance democracy against the brutal Burmese dictatorship. They escaped first to Thailand, trying to leave behind the violent suppression of dissent. They spent the first few years of Tae's life in that refugee camp before they sought and obtained asylum in the United States in 1996. But even in a place of relative freedom and safety, the family struggled to hold itself together in light of the many traumas they had already endured, and to adapt to a country where the language and customs were so foreign. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Tae's developing brain struggled to incorporate all of the change, and her own personal challenges. She felt isolated from the close-knit Burmese immigrant community, but also from the American experience. She was diagnosed with depression and post-traumatic stress disorder while she was in high school, around the time she made her first attempt to die by suicide. But with supportive therapy and medication, she improved and stabilized. Her older sister had joined the military, and when Tae graduated from high school, like so many others, she saw a career in the armed services as a chance to get away, try something new, a chance to come up with her own identity. Tae worked with recruiters for over 2 years, learning that if she could stay off her mental health medication for a year or two, she could get waivers for her diagnoses and join. So in 2013, Tae stepped on the yellow footprints at Parris Island and joined the Marine Corps. In January 2014, Tae hoisted her bag at the luggage claim in Okinawa and emerged into the humidity, ready to begin her service at her first duty station. The change and perhaps the isolation triggered psychological symptoms, and Tae enrolled in therapy, or rather, counseling. I don't know if she sought assistance from the military and family life counselors, a chaplain, or some other form of counselor. But whoever she spent time talking to, it's reported that when that counselor heard what Tae was struggling with, those lingering traumatic childhood experiences, and that she was struggling to adapt to service in a foreign country, the counselor contacted senior Marines and recommended she be immediately processed for medical separation. But Tae wasn't ready to leave the Marine Corps, and she doubled down on her commitment to her career. Instead of medication designed to stabilize her mental health that had proven effective earlier in her life, Tae allegedly turned to self-medicating with alcohol. In August 2015, Tae attended a barracks party in Okinawa and began drinking. In her journal, she wrote that it was always the same group of people that would find any excuse to drink. Hours after the party started, other Marines allegedly discovered Tay passed out in a field. They carried her back to the barracks, laid her down in a bed, and brought her a trash can in case she needed to vomit. They went back to the party, leaving Tay to recover. Tay recalled awaking hours later and discovering one of her superiors, a fellow Marine, on top of her and removing her clothes. She journaled about him having sex with her limp body, reported slipping in and out of consciousness, the weight of his body on hers, and his hot, disgusting breath. But more than that, she wrote of her fear. In part due to that fear, Tay was slow to report the alleged rape. She had just a handful of months left on station and would move somewhere new, somewhere away from the man who raped her. But because she didn't report the incident, she continued reporting to her alleged rapist daily. She went so far later to describe it as selfish of her to report it, but she did make an informal report to a senior naval officer, her chaplain, and other Marines. In December 2015, Tay moved off the Rock for her new assignment in Virginia. Sources were a little unclear on where she moved, when she moved there, and what she worked on. But whatever the case, Tay continued to struggle with what happened to her. She became more psychologically fragile, and her day-to-day became much more fraught. Even though she appeared on track career-wise, in private she disclosed that she was struggling. To one sergeant major, she wrote that she was hitting a real low, and that she was trying to hold it together and be positive in front of everyone else, but that her true feelings made her feel weak. Shortly thereafter, Tay recognized the depths of her low mood and enrolled in mental health services. She alleged that her command didn't keep her medical information private and that they allowed malicious rumors to circulate about her mental health appointments. During her treatment, she received a variety of mental health diagnoses, and her doctors began the process of medical retirement. Her Navy doctors labeled Tay's impairment as severe and believed she was experiencing gaps in thought processing, had compromised judgment, and was paranoid about her safety. One of the medications she was on increased her risk of suicidal ideation, aggression, insomnia, and mania. When she reached out to one of her leaders in the Marine Corps looking for help, looking for a lifeline, she alleged that he did agree that he would help, but only in return for sexual favors. Tay reported severe paranoia, feeling as though her entire unit turned on her. During this downward slide, Tay got into a verbal altercation with someone in her unit. It was an argument severe enough that Tay was reduced from sergeant to corporal. She'd become erratic and short-tempered, lashing out at the people she worked with and for. In the fall of 2019, Tay finally made that unrestricted report to her leadership about the assault that she said occurred in Okinawa. Around that time, rumors about that reported rape began to circulate in her unit. NCIS investigated, but the alleged rape was never prosecuted. One news outlet asserts that NCIS's investigation was anemic at best, alleging agents failed to interview witnesses who were there that night, witnesses the reporters were able to connect with. Apparently, the NCIS report reflects that they interviewed 4 Marines, the accused, 2 of Tay's ex-boyfriends, and 1 other male Marine. They reportedly all made disparaging remarks about her. It doesn't appear that NCIS interviewed any of the people Tay previously told about her assault, that Navy chaplain or other Marines. In February 2020, her boyfriend reported to their command that while they were pulling over so he could call for help because Tay reported feeling suicidal, Tay jumped out of his moving vehicle and darted in front of oncoming traffic. a Toyota 4Runner managed to slam to a stop just feet from Tay. With this increase in symptoms, she renewed her request to be transferred to the Wounded Warrior Battalion, aware that things couldn't continue the way they were going, that she couldn't keep showing up at work each day and fraying a bit more at the edges. Her application was again denied. When the world went into lockdown for COVID-19, Tay and her boyfriend, a fellow Marine, hunkered down in their shared Virginia home. On April 1st, a medical board unanimously recommended Tay for medical retirement. Just 4 days later, Tay and her boyfriend squabbled over the cost they would incur if they bought a washer and dryer. He thought it was best if he leave their shared home to give everyone breathing space and an opportunity to cope. But from what I can uncover, Tay saw that as a breakup. Tay began drinking to cope. When her boyfriend returned and asked her to leave, she did, briefly. But she rushed back inside and grabbed a knife from the kitchen. Tay reported that she wanted to use that knife to hurt herself. But then Tay spotted her boyfriend. Or rather, she spotted someone in the house. Even though she knew that it was only her and her boyfriend in the house, she didn't see her boyfriend in that moment. In that moment, she saw her rapist. Seeing the person she believed hurt her, Tay chased her boyfriend through the house with a knife, allegedly trying to stab him. He ducked into the bedroom, locking the door behind him, and called the police, hoping they could de-escalate the situation. When the police arrived, they arrested Tay, even though her boyfriend and neighbor both advocated for her to be admitted to a mental health facility. Her boyfriend has long maintained that he was not worried about being hurt that day, that he summoned law enforcement because he needed their help in responding to Tay's mental health crisis. She first went to a long-term psychiatric care facility before being released back to her unit to await court-martial. A military protective order prevented her from initiating any contact with her boyfriend. She violated that protective order twice, about 2 weeks later, first by phone, then by showing up in the house, trying to talk to him and trying to apologize. When she went to the house, she used her key to let herself in. Her boyfriend locked himself in the bedroom and asked her to leave, which she did. When she again expressed suicidal ideation, her boyfriend contacted authorities, who then located her and transported her to another psychiatric facility. At some point after she transferred over to the brig for pretrial confinement, Tay again attempted to die by suicide. She was transferred to the Naval Medical Center Portsmouth to receive treatment. While she was there for treatment, somebody took Tay's blanket, the blanket that I think she came in with. That upset her, and she slipped out of her wrist restraints and used them to shatter a window in her door. The broken glass hit 2 other service members, causing minor injuries. After that incident, Tay remained confined in the Naval Consolidated Brig in Chesapeake. She spent 328 days in confinement, and of those 328 days, she spent approximately 160 of them in solitary confinement, also referred to as special quarters. The cell, the suicide risk cell, as Tay described it, consisted of a bare room with a hole in the middle acting as a toilet, flushable only by a button pushed by guards. Pictures reveal that it's a hole covered by a grate, but I don't think that really matters all that much. Tay often had a mattress and blanket, but little else. She had no access to books or anything else that might help occupy her disordered mind. She was told her ability to speak with her defense counsel was contingent on her improving her behavior. To be clear, nowhere in the constitutional right to counsel does it say that you have to be well-behaved. Tay claims that at one point she was denied access to utensils to eat with, and to her sleeping mat and her blanket because of the potential they could be used to self-harm. Further, she alleged that the brig guards made fun of her, asking her why she wasn't, quote, normal. Beyond the cinder blocks of the brig, Tay's attorneys fought to get her mental health support. They said Tay couldn't receive regular mental health checkups while she was in pretrial confinement because the staff didn't know how long she would be detained. But once she finally got the support she needed, her behavior in the brig improved. With all this history, I can see why the brig was considered the least restrictive environment Tay could be in while awaiting her court-martial. But I think it would be ignorant to say that solitary confinement could have possibly been helpful. The government charged Tay with 9 separate charges. These included attempted premeditated murder, attempted unpremeditated murder, aggravated assault on an intimate partner with a dangerous weapon, burglary, violating a protective order, communicating a threat, destruction of government property, that's for shattering that window, assault consummated by battery for the 2 service members struck by broken glass, and willfully disobeying a superior commissioned officer. Her boyfriend, the victim in this case, expressed that he wished he hadn't reported the incident. He wished he hadn't summoned emergency services that day, and he wished that Tay hadn't been court-martialed. At one of her hearings, 2 reporters reportedly overheard the Regional Defense Counsel mocking Tay's case, highlighting what one reporter later described as a complete lack of professionalism and respect among Marine Corps leaders involved in Tay's case. Having poked around the dark corners of a Reddit thread about Tay's case, I don't think what the Regional Defense Counsel allegedly said is inconsistent with what people muse about anonymously online. It's probably worth observing here that the Marine Corps is approximately 90% men. I thought about that statistic a lot while I was researching this case. There seems to be this prevailing sentiment that Tay made a false claim of sexual assault as her defense to assaulting her boyfriend. But she told people what happened before she left Okinawa. Then she made her unrestricted report before the assault where she mistook her boyfriend for her rapist. Ultimately, after the government dropped the attempted murder charges, Tay accepted a plea agreement, pleading guilty to 1 count of aggravated assault on an intimate partner with a dangerous weapon, 2 counts of assault consummated by battery, 1 count of destruction of government property, and 2 specifications of willfully disobeying a superior commissioned officer, which I think was for violating the military protective order. Her attorneys argued that her medical retirement should be honored so that Tay could continue to receive care. Sort of like the Dodgers keeping Andrew Toles signed to a $0 contract each year so he maintains access to the team's health insurance. Her counsel wondered who could possibly be deterred by giving Tay a bad conduct discharge, asking whether Tay's punishment could reasonably be a deterrent to someone else in the throes of an untreated mental health crisis. It's not exactly like we're expecting people in those circumstances to approach everything with logic. But I think there may be value in extending that line of questions back further. What benefit did Tay receive from being recruited to the Marine Corps? What benefit did the Corps receive recruiting a young woman with diagnosed mental health disorders who was stable with her medication and treatment? Sure, the recruiter probably made quota, but at what cost? The woman they signed up was not the woman who was stable on a medication regimen and receiving treatment. The woman they signed up lost her supportive tools at their direction, then joined an organization dominated by men, moved across the world to where she didn't know anybody and didn't have the resources or permission to get the help she needed, totally isolated from what support system she did have. Consistent with her plea, the military judge sentenced Tay to time served, reduced her to E1, and selected a bad conduct discharge. But the judge recommended suspending her discharge for 6 months, meaning Tay would remain eligible for her healthcare benefits and could continue accessing the medication she used to treat her mental health. Unfortunately, the convening authority rejected that recommendation. I think withdrawing the attempted murder charges was closer to a just outcome, but I keep circling this case like a floral arrangement, trying to find which spot we can consider looking at it straight on. I have so much empathy for this person who was so clearly in distress, who had been unraveling for years, and who, by her family's own claims, should have never been able to enlist. I confess that I spend a little too much time contemplating just how young people who enlist in the military really are, how little they know about themselves and how much opportunity they have to grow. Tay, like so many others who scrambled to the yellow boot prints, was looking to find herself in service to this country. And what strikes me is just how honest and vulnerable Tay was. She didn't hide her diagnoses, and she listened when her recruiter told her that if she discontinued her medication, she might be able to enlist. She repeatedly reached out seeking help and support once she was in the fleet and began to struggle. And perhaps it's unfair to think that an armed service is the space that can provide that support, that is equipped to handle that level of need. But I keep returning to the fact that the Marine Corps knew about this issue when they signed her up, and I want to believe that there is some level of accountability for the young people that come to them and sign up to serve. I want to think that there's some measure of reciprocity. But perhaps that's really a statement about mental health resources and services more generally. I want my tax dollars to make sure that young people experiencing health crises, both mental and physical, have access to care, not just guns. Instead, when the Marine Corps faced Tay's increasing need following her reports, if her recitation of the facts is accurate, she faced a chilling lack of empathy or even basic respect for what she reported experiencing, both the assault and her basic health information. And given those dark corners of that Reddit thread, it doesn't exactly require the suspension of disbelief to take her statements as accurate, to believe that she was mocked for needing help by the people who took the same oath to country and constitution that she did. On appeal, Tay challenged only that her bad conduct discharge was inappropriately severe. The Navy and Marine Corps Court of Criminal Appeals was unpersuaded, highlighting that she received the benefit of negotiated plea boundaries and that the offenses were severe enough to justify the sentence. She further appealed to the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, but I haven't seen much traction there. ABC shared Tay's story on a special entitled Battle Cry, Fighting Assault in the Military, in case that's of interest to you, Legal Beagle. It seems that Tay has really found herself outside the confines of the Marine Corps and with the benefit of treatment. She and that boyfriend married and have a child together, and it appears she's found a career that she's passionate about. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it. I invite you to submit case suggestions and feedback to conductunbecomingpod@gmail.com. Join me next time when we take a hard pivot to hard drugs and search consent. Until then, take care. Conduct Unbecoming is a podcast where I get to talk about interesting crimes and cases that involve U.S. military service members. I research, write, and produce the podcast myself. The opinions expressed are my own, and perhaps it's obvious. Conduct Unbecoming is not approved, authorized, or endorsed by the Department of Defense.